Welcome back to Cosmic Comics. Today I'm going to take a look at a series set in a period just prior to Captain Marvel's first appearance. I'll go ahead and say it. I'm not certain we needed this 3-issue limited series, and I never thought that this would be my first in-depth Captain Marvel video. Let's take a look at The Untold Legend of Captain Marvel, published in April of 1997. The story opens on the Kree planet of Tarsus, which is about to be eaten by Galactus. From what we are shown, the Kree are completely unprepared to deal with Galactus and fail to even be capable of getting a systems lock on the Silver Surfer, who continuously blasts Kree ships out of the sky. Meanwhile, on the surface, Captain Marvel is busy retrieving an intelligence matrix for headquarters. Notice how artist Scott Collins captures the weakness of the surrounding military men in both their facial expressions and the contrast between them and the strong confidence oozing from Captain Marvel. The crew makes it back to their ship where they quickly get the Matrix stowed away. Before the crew can carefully settle in, the ship has to make an emergency takeoff due to an earthquake. Lieutenant Rendef's harness is jammed, and before he can secure himself, both Lieutenant and the intelligence matrix are jettisoned from the ship. Without skipping a beat, Captain Marvel uses his personal jets to dive out after Rendef. The information matrix is lost, but Marvel is successful in saving his fellow officer. Once both officers are back on board, the mission is scrapped, the planet is lost, and all units are called upon to fall back. Captain Marvel is left with only memories of a once beautiful, peaceful planet. Upon returning to command, Marvel is chewed out by Colonel Hez Tar for having prioritized saving a subordinate over retrieving information deemed valuable by the Supreme Intelligence. Marvel's response is that in the heat of the moment, he followed his instincts, to which the Colonel responds that Marvel's instincts require correction. We then learn that this isn't the first time that something like this has happened. In fact, despite having an otherwise stellar record, Marvel's time in service is littered with incidents that show a lack of judgment from a militaristic perspective. The Colonel makes it clear that he would just as soon see Captain Marvel stripped of his rank and sent to live in the stockades. Instead of being taken into custody, Marvel is given new orders by Central Command. Marvel has been given a special assignment to Commander Zen Pram's elite force on a world-beater-class ship, the Imperial cruiser Palma. Marvel's entry into his new assignment goes without incident. While on the dock, the captain is greeted by Palma's second-in-command, Colonel Yon-Rog. Note the shadowy entrance and sinister shading on the face. The two soldiers take a moment for some friendly banter, which is interrupted when somebody catches Marvel's eye. Chronologically speaking, this is the first time that Captain Marvel and his love, Lady Una, meet. Yon-Rog attempts to talk Una down as he introduces her to Marvel by saying things such as, "She is merely a medic." This bit of nastiness doesn't go unnoticed, and Una calls Yon-Rog out through the use of a compliment. In fact, while he's off guard, Una insists on showing Marvel to his room. As the two of them walk off together, Una is already creeping in with a hand on the back, and we all know Yon-Rog has to notice, but he lets it slide for now. On the way to their rooms, Una confesses that she's been stalking Marvel a little bit by reading up on his file. She's curious about the incident that happened on Tarsus, as any other Kree soldier would have placed greater value on the military objective over the life of a fellow soldier. Marvel again insists it wasn't a choice, it was instinct. Instincts that require correction. Una calls Marvel out for being a poor liar and insists that the preservation of life is the greater act of the two despite the directives of Central Command. She makes it clear that she thinks that they need more men of good conscience who can think for themselves within the Kree stifling, warmongering society. Marvel evades the conversation by inquiring as to how Una became a medic within such a warmongering culture. We're then giving an interesting insight into the Kree culture that we rarely get. Una states that every individual wages war for what he or she considers important: land, wealth, stature, prestige, and that the only thing that she could find worth fighting for was life. She recognizes that she lives in a society that views her function as non-essential. She sees this viewpoint as short-sighted, and she's willing to speak out about it. She goes on to brag about the battles she's fought, the victories she's won, the thousands of lives she has saved, all through the use of medical science. Then she blows Captain Marvel's mind when she says, "Is not the life of a Kree soldier of equal value to the death of an enemy, if not more?" With that bomb dropped, she steps up to her door and then lays it on again, stating that she'll be counting the moments until they meet once more. She opens her door and Marvel's mind is blown once again. Una has a shrine to the old Kotate religion and admits to following their precepts. And I'll discuss the Kotate in detail once I get around to the Kree-Skrull war, but needless to say, this is something that is generally frowned upon within Kree culture. In fact, Marvel immediately points out that such practice has been outlawed as an act of sedition. Una seemed surprised that he doesn't know that certain rules can be more lax on starships far from home. More amazingly, High Command is aware of her beliefs, but tolerates them because Una is so good at her job. And as Una closes the door on Marvel, it's definitely got a vibe of, and that's how things work in the real world. We pick up with the crew once more in the ship's war room. We know several of those in attendance. On the screen in the back is the Supreme Intelligence. The gentleman within the center of the circle is introduced as Minister Zarek Supremor. We finally meet the leader of the PAMA, Commander Zin Prom. Also in attendance are Marvel, Yon-Rog, and Una. Wait, if Una is merely a medic and her position isn't valued by the Kree, why is she attending this meeting? Moving on. The minister informs the crew that the Supreme Intelligence has hand-selected the crew of their ship due to the importance of their mission. In fact, putting together this crew is one of the many long games that the Supreme Intelligence is working on. Now for the debriefing. Grand Admiral Devros of the High Command has ceased contact with the homeworld. This began 2 cycles ago while on a special expeditionary assignment to Absalon Sector. The final communication from their flagship was a frantic request for help. Due to the amount of military secrets known by the Admiral, he is a high-value target. The Supreme Intelligence breaks in to emphasize that they cannot allow their enemies to profit from the volume of information contained within this one high-value individual. Both rescue and termination are considered successful options for this operation. To help ensure a successful mission, the PAMA will be the only cruiser deployed, and once again it is reiterated that they are a hand-picked crew. Una weighs in that this is probably due to most of them being considered expendable. So what? They have to go into the Absalon star system to retrieve some top brass. How rough could it be? Marvel is the first to point out that the Absalon star system is classified as a level 5 risk zone, indicating maximum hazard. In relation to that, the Skrull throne world only ranks at level 4. Commander Zin Pram tells the crew that they will be going in cloaked behind an aura of negativism. Of utmost importance, radio silence must be observed. Yon-Rog is given the job of calculating their approach to the Absalon sector. As everyone walks down the hallway together, heading back to their post, we see a Yon-Rog who is perhaps the happiest we will ever see him. He's excited about potentially saving Admiral Devros, who is referred to as the model general at the academies, and Yon-Rog personally attempts to emulate him. Commander of the Prama Zin Pram breaks in. Remember that Skrulls come in 2 skin types, blue and pink, and speaking amongst his fellow pink skins, the commander shares that Devros is a blue-skinned racist. While serving under Devros during the Montrox campaign, Zin Pram got to know Devros' disgust of pink-skinned Kree firsthand and his willingness to sacrifice as many of their lives as it took to overcome whatever obstacles there were at the battlefield. Basically, he would just throw pink-skinned troops at problems. He feels so strongly about this that as he walks off, he says that if they are lucky, the crew will find Devros' bones laying behind, bleached in the starshine. Ouch. We get some interesting reactions to this conversation. Yon-Rog sees the reaction as one of jealousy, but Marvel is quick to point out that the Supreme Intelligence handpicked this commander for a reason. Once again, we get some great facial expressions, and once again it feeds into the idea of being an expendable handpicked crew. Shortly thereafter, the crew proceeds with their mission. They cloak themselves in an aura of negativism, go radio silent, and along the way, begin bonding and meshing together as a crew. One day, after what appears to be a dashing fencing session, the ship's alarm goes off and our heroes take off to report for duty. In the distance, several alien vessels have engaged in a firefight, although the Kree vessel so far remains undetected. As the ship comes round, they see that the firefight is between a single Shi'Ar scout craft and 3 Skrull war saucers. The Shi'Ar have done a good job of holding off the Skrulls, but are about to get boarded. The commander says what everybody else must already be thinking. It doesn't make sense for either of these parties to be out in this sector of, nothing space. Marvel interrupts his CO to request permission to engage and repel the Skrull intruders. At first, the commander makes the logical decision and refuses Marvel's request, but Marvel insists. He points out that the Shi'Ar are important trade partners and that the Kree have a duty to destroy Skrulls, an enemy of the Empire with whom they are at war. Furthermore, he asks for only one small unit to pull off his attack. After thinking it over, the commander gives in, which makes Marvel all smiles and puts a grimace on the face of Yon-Rog. Marvel heads out with a small strike force. The plan is to split into 1- and 2-man groups, take out the Skrulls, and retake the Shi'Ar scout craft. On the way over to the smaller craft, things get interesting. Starbolt, a fusion caster and member of the Shi'Ar Imperial Guard, appears in the fray. He must have been there all along, as his presence explains how the scout craft was capable of holding its own against the Kree war saucers for so long. Marvel's crew lands on the scout craft and immediately engages with a much larger Skrull force. Interestingly, the Skrull now see this as a plot between the Kree and the Shi'Ar working together. Marvel draws the first blood as they press the attack. Once inside the ship, the Kree strike force find more members of the Shi'Ar Imperial Guard. These are Fang, Lady Sybil, and Smasher. The Skrull boarding party is being outmatched, so they all pull back to regroup. Once there, they surprise the heroes by firing a large gun block. It appears as though the heroes were wiped out by this blast, so the Skrulls turn their guns towards the command center. Fang tells Marvel that they cannot be allowed to breach the bridge, as there is Shi'Ar royalty aboard the ship. Marvel flies in to protect them. Marvel uses his jets as fast as he can to get to the gun block. In the process, he demolishes his target, but hurts himself. A Skrull closes in to finish off the wounded Marvel, but at that moment he takes a knife in the back from Deathbird. Marvel sees his face above him as he passes out, and the issue ends. So, yeah, issue number 1 went several places I wouldn't have expected. Let's see what they do next. Issue 2 opens in a big way. We're shown Captain Marvel as a young boy. It's amazing to think that this comic was published over a decade after the death of Captain Marvel, and this is the first time I ever remember seeing him as a child. Let's see what's going on here. He's holding the hand of a feminine figure who is dropping him off at his new home, the 3rd Northeastern Regional Military Academy, where he's told he will become a man. Young Marvel begins to cry, but his mother tells him no tears. It's time for him to learn to be of value to the state. She goes on to say that she's been ordered to join his father as a military liaison for his Lightspeed project, and that she can mother him no longer. Time to wean the child, hand him over to the state, and get back to work. Such is the life of a Kree. After this flashback, Marvel wakes up on the Pama under the care of medic Una. The battle with the Skrulls has concluded. After the battle was over, Fang carried Marvel to sickbay. Una wonders what Marvel was thinking with his maneuver on the Shi'Ar ship, and Marvel explains the logic behind his calculated approach. Words that would later come back to haunt him. Still, Una doesn't seem overly impressed with the heroics. Interestingly, Una tells Marvel that he'll never die in bed, which is odd because if you've read The Death of Captain Marvel, he most certainly dies in bed. The conversation is broken up by crisis, and Marvel is called away to deal with a situation in Shuttle Bay 2. On the Shuttle Bay, we have a simple showdown of command structures bristling against each other. The Kree have been tasked with holding the Imperial Guard in place, and the Imperial Guard have been tasked with protecting the Regent at all times. Starbolt clears a path for the Guard, and Lady Sybil detects that their ranks are in disarray. As the guards prepare to walk out of the flames and towards their destination, one man steps forward to take control of the situation and tells them to go no further. It's Captain Marvel. Smasher tells Marvel to step aside, but when he tries to put his money where his mouth is, Marvel tosses him to the side. Fang jumps into the battle, but Marvel is quick to point out that raw, feral strength cannot hope to overcome skill. The whole of the Imperial Guard is about to jump into the battle when it is suddenly called to a halt. Deathbird calls her guard out for not being more patient with the aliens who have so generously helped them. She then apologizes to Marvel for their actions. She then turns the conversation around on him by insisting that the Imperial Guard should probably come to the meeting with Commander Zen Pram. Marvel agrees, but as the Imperial Guard walk off, Yon-Rog points out that the female member of the Guard is a telepath and that their mission is supposed to remain a secret. Marvel points out that distance wouldn't matter to a telepath, that it would be better to keep the Imperial Guard where they could be watched. Lady Sybil chimes in to point out that as long as the two of them keep talking the way that they do, she has no need to read thoughts when she can use only her ears. Once upon the Kree bridge, Lady Deathbird explains the reason for their being so far away from Shi'Ar space. They were in pursuit of a party that has been raiding Shi'Ar shipping lanes, an unlikely story that a member of royalty and the Imperial Guard would be dispatched to look after backwater shipping lanes. The Shi'Ar claim that they were so focused on pursuit of their prey that they didn't realize where they were until the sudden attack by Skrull war saucers. In fact, the Shi'Ar claim they had no idea why the Skrulls attacked them other than they were a lone vessel that was a long ways from home. Okay, maybe there is something to the Shi'Ar story when we find out that the raiding parties that they have been giving chase to were the Brood. The commander announces that they should have repairs to the Shi'Ar ship completed within a few hours, and offer to escort the scout ship to the Kentari border, an offer that Lady Deathbird declines, stating that they have their mission, and she has hers. On her way out, Lady Deathbird thanks the Kree for their aid, and oddly, stops to admire Captain Marvel, commenting that with his stamina, he would make a fine addition to her elite guard with some definite sexual overtones. Once she's left, the commander asks his number 2 what he makes of her. Yon-Rog insists that both the Shi'Ar and Skrulls are both here for the same reason they are, to capture Admiral Devros. The commander and Yon-Rog are both in agreement on this point, and then we learn why Absalon is considered a 5-star threat. The entire area is Brood territory. Up to this point, the crew hasn't been told, as the commander didn't want to demoralize them. The commander admits to what Una alluded to in the previous issue. The crew of the Palma are expendable and have been sent on a fool's errand. The admiral they seek is most likely dead, and they will most likely die looking for him. With the Shi'Ar ship released, the Kree engage their aura of negativism once more and leave in the direction of Devros' last known transmission. As they close in on that last known location, they approach a life-sustaining planet. A short time later, they discover the remains of Devros' flagship on the surface, along with one of the Brood's sentient Akanti starships. For some reason, Yon-Rog wants to wait before sending the crew down to the planet, but the commander insists that they are no safer here than on the surface. They might as well focus on completing the mission. And, okay, wow, I did not expect them to land that entire ship, but okay, cool. As they prepare to leave, the commander requests that Yon-Rog bring back Devros' head, a near treasonous request. For some reason, maybe in case Devros was injured, Una is joining the Outrider party. Yon-Rog comments on how she'll finally get to see some first-hand combat, but Una retorts with a burn that she's seen plenty of combat from just walking by his bedchambers. I can taste the saltiness. Following that exchange, the ship's crew heads out upon the planet's surface to complete their mission. As everybody leaves, Yon-Rog requests a word with Marvel at his side. For some reason, these boxes just super creep me out. Yon-Rog tells Marvel that Una is a bit of a man-eater, and that she hasn't dined in a while. Marvel retorts by asking if she's ever had a taste of Yon-Rog. Yon-Rog actually gasped at that, and Marvel claims to have no designs on Una. Yeah, sure buddy. You just keep telling yourself that. While the crew begins to search the flagship, their communication system goes down. Oh lord, this is already just like every Alien and Predator movie. Una suggests returning to the ship, but Yon-Rog insists this kind of thing happens all the time in the field. Marvel states that he has a bad feeling and thinks that they need to close their ranks. The next moment sees our crew ambushed by the Brood. As the enemy rushes in, Marvel doesn't like what he sees in his men and demands that they get organized as he rushes into battle. Once again, we get another shot with Marvel diving into the action and looking alpha as F. Suddenly, we learn one reason why the fencing practice was important. The steel of their swords is far more effective against the Brood than the unibeams of their guns. Slowly, Marvel shapes the ground forces into a fighting unit. While most of the Outrider team fights on the ground, Yon-Rog insists on backing away from the action in order to gain a superior strike position. He seems to be running away, but then he turns the ship to dive and attack. At that moment, another figure enters the battlefield. He steps in and fires a shot that appears to strike more Kree than the Brood. The new figure is Admiral Devros, who enters the scene and demands the Kree surrender. Marvel flies in to land a solid blow against Devros' jaw. It's enough to knock off his helmet, but all that does is expose the monstrosity beneath. Devros, who oddly is still racist against pink Kree, has become some form of Kree-Brood hybrid. At that moment, a Brood Queen sneaks up behind Captain Marvel and lands a solid attack. Una sees him go down and begins to call out to him. In this moment, Una in his mind shifts over into the memory of his mother, dropping him off at the academy once more. Once again, she's telling him that she can no longer be his mother, but this time he remembers her following up with, "Be brave. Be strong." Marvel regains consciousness with a Brood Queen in his face, demanding that he be still. Good timing, too, because Devros is preparing to monologue. Zin Pram calls Devros a racist, which Devros happily admits to, saddened that the blue-blooded Kree needed to mix their blood with lesser species to help their own genetic advancement. Devros explains that Prime Minister Zarek told him that his mission was to establish a military beachhead in preparation for an invasion, but that the Supreme Intelligence had other plans. As soon as their ship crossed into Brood territory, they were approached by a giant whale of a ship. They attempted to lead it away from Kree territory. When the opportunity presented itself, the captain killed the massive ship, and both parties landed near each other on this planet. Once on the ground, the Horde soon took over the crew via sheer numbers. Instead of killing the crew, the Brood began using them as hosts for Brood young. At the end of the process, they themselves will become Brood. Then we get an unlikely love story. Devros and the Brood Queen became fascinated with each other, and somehow the two of them reached a meeting of the minds. Devros has finally found an organism other than a blue-skinned Kree who is worthy of his genetic potential. As he says, "I had found the one perfect organism which was my equal." Azure blue vision gave way to a gaze of brood red. Great lines. Just great writing there. The commander claims that Devros has turned his back on everything he once believed in. I disagree. This guy has a well-thought-out position, and it's exactly why the Supreme Intelligence sent him here in the first place. Look, this is all backed up. He admits that he was once misguided by blind xenophobia and suffered from a limited viewpoint. He then goes on to recognize that both the Brood and the Kree are militaristic and predatory races. For the first time ever, he sees the potential to surpass his innate genetic potential, and thanks to his perfect genes matched with hers, the embryo inside of him will be a new being, a Brood King. All they needed now for their plan to be successful was a ship to get them off of this planet. By sending out a distress signal, Devros knew that the Supreme Intelligence would respond and want to know what had happened to his experiment. Now that the crew of the Palma was dispatched, the Brood King and Brood Queen finally had a way to leave the planet and begin their holy crusade. Marvel escapes because I think all this rotten posturing is making him mad. Fortunately for him, he was being kept right beside a giant pile of guns. I mean, seriously, why is this even here? Marvel is capable of grabbing some firepower, pivoting, and killing the Brood Queen with some well-placed shots. Well, that was over as fast. That's why you don't keep a giant pile of guns right next to your prisoners. Devros comforts his love while the Brood reinforcements arrive. Marvel puts one of the guns on overload, essentially turning it into a grenade, which stops the Brood's approach. Marvel grabs a sword out of the oh-so-convenient weapon pit and begins cutting Una free. All the while, Yon-Rog begs to be cut loose, but Marvel ignores his pleas. As more Brood approach, Marvel escapes with Una and leaves a shocked Yon-Rog behind. Una is also shocked to see Marvel leaving Yon-Rog and the rest of the crew behind. Marvel assures her that there is no point in rescuing any of them as long as they still carry the Brood's eggs within themselves. What needs to be done to save them all can only be accomplished by Una and Marvel. We then end up in this odd situation where Devros is giving orders to the Brood and they are asking him what to do next. It's his decision not to pursue Marvel. We transition out of this second issue with Marvel reflecting on his mother leaving him, gun drawn, and he's watching over a sleeping Una. Whew. Okay, now we've gone from the Shi'Ar Imperial Guard to sitting alone with Una on a lost backwater planet, knowing that in a short time, Marvel will become one of the Brood. If the third cover lives up to its promise, we are about to be, drowning in Brood. The third issue opens with the Brood rolling in. Lucky for our heroes, the swarm passes by overhead. Marvel notes that they don't seem to be putting much energy into finding them. Marvel obviously has a plan, but things take a dark turn as Una bursts into tears and begs Marvel to kill her. She lays it all out there. She's been thinking about it all night. The two of them are trapped alone on a planet teeming with inhuman living killing machines, while their command structure might as well be dead, and the two of them who are left have embryonic broodlings growing inside of them, who will eventually hatch and take over their bodies before they mature. I mean, when you put it like that, maybe she has a point. Basically, Una doesn't want to become another broodling. She would rather die first. And as she stares off into space and reflects upon the growing hunger inside of her, Marvel decides that this is the moment to make a move, and he lays down a big wet kiss. I mean, really, that was inappropriate. Afterwards, he agrees to kill his love, but only when no other option remains. In the meantime, they still need to attempt to stop Devros and his Brood followers from returning to space. Okay, this series only has 30 more pages left in it, and Marvel comes up with a 5-part plan to hopefully take us through the end of the story. Number 1, get aboard the Palma without being detected. 2, find a way to cripple the ship irreparably. 3, Una will determine if the Brood eggs can be neutralized. 4, and this is a good one, find a new way off the planet. 5, find a way to recover their fellow crew. Wow, that's a lot of stuff to do. Let's see how this goes. Marvel gives his remaining gun to Una. She's concerned that he's unarmed, but then he goes all boss on her. Medic Una, I am the weapon. This is a pretty sweet scene. Marvel and Una charging off into battle together. Never again will we get to see this. Much respect that this got thrown in. The two return to the Palma and enter the ship via a secondary beam weapons array. Essentially, they are sneaking in through the weapons barrel. We can see that the area surrounding the ship is covered in Brood. Once inside, Marvel and Una have to take out a Brood. Una proves to be a crack shot. Marvel asks when her shooting improved. She says it didn't, she just took the chance that any stray shots would have been stopped by his uniform's refractory coating. Cold. Using his own words against him, or maybe she's more Kree than she lets on. So yeah, that was the whole reference earlier. Anyways, the two heroes manage to make their way back to the med lab. We learn that Marvel knows his way around ships so well because he's familiarized himself with ship schematics throughout his life as a way to feel closer to his father, who helped design improvements to faster-than-light travel for spaceships. As Marvel prepares to leave the med lab, he takes back the weapon he gave Una earlier. Marvel heads out to dismantle the ship, while Una stays behind to work on a solution to the eggs incubating inside of them. So far, this plan is working out pretty good. A short time later, Marvel locates the main power coupling of the secondary systems. He sets the gun to explode as he did previously in the arc, and then turns to leave after thanking his father for sparking his interest in ship design. Marvel makes his way to the main engine room, which seems deserted, until he is attacked by one of the brood. The two struggle back over a ledge. After landing below, Marvel prepares to strike a killing blow when suddenly the beast speaks to him in the voice of Commander Zen Prom. Yeah, you didn't see that one coming. It's too late for the commander, and Captain Marvel strikes the killing blow. Afterwards, he stands and salutes his former commander. While in this moment of reflection, Marvel is struck by a whip, and a voice calls out, accusing him of killing his commanding officer. Devros knew that Marvel would strike either the engine room or the bridge, and assumed that he would arrive in the engine room, as it was the more efficient and therefore predictable choice. He points out that killing one's commanding officer smacks of mutiny. Devros is proud that in a matter of time, Marvel will become like him, as he begins the metamorphosis. He doesn't need to kill Marvel, he merely needs to keep him from completing his mission until he turns into an asset. At that point, they'll pick up Una and leave for Kree together. Marvel isn't out of the battle yet. He says don't count on it as Devros lets loose another crack of his whip. This time Marvel grabs a hold of the whip and starts throwing punches. Devros actually seems pleased by this and encourages Marvel to get carried away on a tide of hate. At last, Devros strikes out. He encourages Marvel to let loose of the confines of his being this perfect Kree soldier and instead just be free and allow his heart to show what it feels. Seriously, at the end of 3 comics, this is what we have the bad guy preaching? Be yourself and follow your heart? Marvel gives Devros a face full of steam. As Marvel goes to strike Devros down, he insists that Devros doesn't know him. Marvel makes it a point to say that although he follows the path of the warrior, he doesn't crave bloodshed or war. At that moment, an explosion takes place elsewhere in the ship. Devros asks, "What is going on?" and Marvel obliges. He tells Devros that he has started a cascade effect throughout the lower systems of the vessel, and the ship is now doomed. This entire battle was nothing more than a diversionary tactic while he waited for his true attack to take place elsewhere. Devros is very upset about this turn of events and attacks Captain Marvel, insisting that he will feast on Marvel's living heart. But Marvel states that he'll never fall to one such as him, and then Marvel calls Devros out as a miserable, pathetic racist before cracking his neck. He turns towards the brood and he's like, "Who's next?" When none of them take him up on his offer, he walks out. Marvel returns to Una, whom he has dropped the quarantine long enough for him to enter. His current state ends up startling Uma, but he reports that he defeated Devros. The perfect general is no more. And then he attacks her, claiming that he is now the Brood King, but Una turns and blasts him with an unknown device. She then reports that in her battle she was also a success. She modified an Omniwave projector to emit a specific band of radiation that harms Kree but is deadly to the brood eggs. If you can survive the treatment, you are 100% cured. Marvel arises, cured of the brood. Marvel is shocked that she let him in when she knew that he was in the process of becoming brood, but she confesses that she tested the device on herself earlier, and that is how she knew that it worked. Una and Marvel prepare to jettison sickbay away from the rest of the ship. They should have enough speed to break through the planet's gravity, and they have enough rations to last for an undefined period of time. Once in space, they'll put out a distress call and hope that somebody responds. With less than 3 minutes before the sickbay blasts off from the rest of the ship, Marvel spots Colonel Yon-Rog on the planet below. And, wow, Una attempts to convince Marvel not to rescue Yon-Rog, insisting that he's a maggot and that nobody will miss him. This is really the only part of writing in this entire trilogy that I feel is a little bit off. We made it a point in the very first issue to point out that Una values life above all other things. Therefore, it doesn't make sense that she wouldn't side with Marvel here on trying to rescue Yon-Rog. It, I think, is a little bit out of place for her character. But let's move on. Una insists that Marvel's throwing his life away on an impossible mission. She says it can't be done. Marvel says, "Watch me." Okay, the final bit of action before we close this out. Marvel bursts forth from the ship. He then crashes through swarms of brood. He bursts through to a despondent and surprised Yon-Rog and starts flying back. The sickbay capsule ejects from the ship before they can get there. Captain Marvel presses onward. Una reaches out the back of the ship, and they struggle to grasp each other's hands, but we all know how this ends, right? Because, I mean, they're, like, we've seen them together later. Okay. An explosion rocks the surface of the planet, and the small sickbay pushes deeper into space. Weeks later, a Shi'Ar ship responds to the Kree distress signal. It is now Deathbird who is rescuing the same Kree soldiers who rescued her. Yon-Rog petitions for safe passage back home, but Deathbird makes it clear that she feels she is under no such obligation, and that her intelligence mongers might like to get their hands on a Kree colonel. She points out that to the Kree, all of them are dead men. They all perished with their ship. Using some language that a bird lady might understand, Marvel asks Deathbird not to strut for them and insists that she will escort them to the Kree homeworld. In turn, she remarks that Marvel is different from his fellow Kree. There is a fire in his blood that has been extinguished in the rest of his race, the same fire that burns in herself. She notes that they are both throwbacks to an earlier age, and as such they write the legends that others worship so avidly. She then agrees to take them home. Several weeks later, we see Una checking in at Marvel at the hospital. We discover that Yon-Rog has been made captain of his own ship, and that both of them have been assigned to it. Since Yon-Rog was the ranking officer when they returned from their mission, he was attributed with the mission's success. Una points out that Yon-Rog knows that Marvel was responsible for the success of the mission, and that he's jealous of what Marvel has accomplished. She warns that Yon-Rog will stop at nothing to destroy him. For the moment, Marvel is content that he has found Una and has found some measure of peace. When the two of them report in for duty, Marvel asks what their assignment is. They are told they are heading towards a backwater planet where the natives have beaten both a Kree sentry and Ronan the Accuser. Their job is to infiltrate the Earthlings and see if they represent a threat to the Empire. And wow, I'm still not sure we needed that trilogy at all. Perhaps not one bit, but there you have it. The Untold Legend of Captain Marvel, and as you might guess, my next video will be on the first appearance of Captain Marvel as I continue to build towards the Kree-Skrull War. And wow, now we've started on Captain Marvel. We've started on Captain Marvel. I promise, eventually I'm going to get around to Quasar issue number 2, but there is so much to unpack before we get there. Thanks for watching. Feel free to hit any of the buttons below. I'm out.